Welcome to Sollu Kaburz podcast. It's been 6 long months. New year, new me, because I've not done any podcast this year. As some of you know, that I have actually moved to a different country, different city. So I've been taking time to settle down, just get used to things. So I did not have any chance to run behind my podcast. I'm still not running behind my podcast. It's just that my guest Aidan here, whose third time it is on this podcast, basically, he had a very interesting topic to discuss, which I thought would be worthy enough for a discussion. Many interesting events have happened before April, whatever date this is today. But it's just that I did not find the energy to find the guests and do the podcast topic. But Aidan kind of approached me, and I thought it'd be a right time to discuss this. So welcome, Aidan, once again to the podcast. Talking to you finally on a proper North American time zone, rather than waking up late at night and making you wake up early in the morning or whatever, right? So we're finally at the same time zone. Nice to have you again. Welcome back. As you know, Aidan has been with us. I think our very recent episode, probably 82nd or 81st, 80th, something. We discussed on what did we discuss on? Elections?
Car culture.
Car culture. Sorry, exactly. That's right. And man, let me tell you something. After all that we spoke about, all the transportation and car culture in North America, I'll just take a couple of minutes on this. I see that, man. I see that. Dudes just driving big trucks for no reason, and Toronto's public transport is reasonably okay. But when I plan some visit to some Chicago or whatever, right, I look at the transport. It makes me cry, because all the public transport, whatever the public transport there is in North American cities, I feel like it all is in the service of capitalistic interests, in the sense that it only has infrastructure that will take you from work to home and home to work. That's it.
It's getting people into the city center from the suburbs. It's like,
exactly.
Especially Chicago,
Not just in Chicago, right? Even in Toronto, I see all the trains and the buses are very frequent from 7 to 10 in the morning and 4 to 7 in the evening. So getting people to work and getting people off work, like as if that is the only thing people do in their life and nothing else. Right? On a weekend, I want to go some park. No bus, no train. I have to take 10 buses, change 10 routes. So
it's insane.
Very, very capitalist serving public transport is what it is. The only public thing about the public transport is the name itself. There's nothing really serving in the service of public over there. But yeah, that's about that episode.
Manhattan,
Yeah, really, I have no clue. I just look at the Google Maps of the public transport. It just makes me cry. I'm like, I have to change 7 buses to get 30 miles, and you get 20 minutes to get 30 miles in a car. So it's very car friendly, car friendly. And the amount of roads here, like there are enough roads at an intersection than there are in an entire town in India.
Oh, literally. It's the biggest. It's the insane amounts of waste, and it's even worse. Like, I think Toronto, from my understanding, like I haven't been there since I was really young. My understanding is that even though Toronto is like still very North American in infrastructure, it has comparatively high rates of bus use.
I will literally show you a map, right? Phoenix, it will just make you cry, like somewhere near airport, right? So I'm just let me zoom in near the airport. Okay. Here it is. Like look at this. What is this?
So that's all of America. Like that.
Why?
It's insane.
It's just like look at the airport. Like how many? This is denser than my nervous system. Like what is this? Like
for real. No, I'm just American, so like I'm used to it. It's insane. And like when you go abroad, you're like, why is half of our space just like
roads?
Literally roads.
It's mad. So anyways, that was the topic of our I think somewhere in the 80s. That was the episode number. You can go check out. We had a very elaborate discussion, and Aidan really broke down everything very well. But today we are with a different topic. It is called antitrust laws. I honestly have to admit I had no clue about this. I mean, I had some opinions on what monopolies are and this, but I don't know. I never knew that there is something called an antitrust law that really is useful in keeping monopolies in check. We'll talk about all that. But Aidan, welcome once again. We are talking about antitrust laws, but honestly, tell me, how does the guy or the girl on the road actually know about this topic or this law? What is your understanding of people's understanding of what antitrust is and what antitrust laws are, and where did this term come from? Like, because I come from India, what do you think about the commonality of this term?
For sure. So I think that for this discussion, I'm mostly focused on antitrust as it relates to like the big tech companies. In the context of antitrust, and what I mean by that for viewers is competition or monopoly law, just making sure that no company or no individual can, monopolize the market, because that screws over the markets, it screws over consumers and small businesses, et cetera. I'm mainly focused on the four big tech companies, Google, Amazon, Facebook, and Apple, and how they, clearly show just like massive disregard for markets in a variety of ways that I'll get into. And yeah, we kind of discussed this before the show, but the term antitrust is, I think, in America, exclusive term. They just use the term monopoly or competition law elsewhere. They have, we have the FTC in America, Federal Trade Commission. In India, they have the CCI. I think that's the Competition Commission of India. They have, in Canada, I'm trying to think what they have in Canada. Not totally sure. They had the CMA, the Competition Market Authority in the UK. Basically, the idea is just that we should not be, living in like an 1880s style Gilded Age where you have a handful of like railroad monopolists back then, and now it's just monopoly power in every industry. And this has become like, we created antitrust laws in like the 1890s, 1910s, because we're like, no, you shouldn't be able to conspire with other monopolists to like rig markets in your favor. That means that you can just make prices what you want. That means you can screw over consumers. And we put laws into place to stop that. Unfortunately, in the last 50 years with like right-wing economics, it's kind of gone back into that. And all of this kind of, as an issue, this sounds sort of dry to talk about. But the thing is, it's like, this interacts with so many other broader issues with just society at large. Like the main thing is like, you can't really have when you have such concentrated corporate power, that kind of just, takes away from the possibility of real democracy. Like you can't really have, you can still have a society with elections and civic participation, but as long as that many resources are concentrated in the hands of a few small firms, I mean, that's not really a democratic society in any meaningful way. And we have broader discussions of this in the context of thinking about, corporate power in general, but I think it's also important to take the lens of competition as well. Just thinking in terms of not just that we have a few super insanely rich people, monopolizing wealth, so to speak, but that like in the context of so many sectors, from tech to airlines to glasses. That's why America pays so much oil. Yeah. And that's why we pay so much for glasses. That's a specific issue, but
I
stuff
swear,
like healthcare.
Man. Who the hell pays $100 for contact lenses? I was just blown away.
Wait, do you have to do that in Canada too?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I don't think. Opticals are not really, unless you have a company benefit, opticals are not paid for.
Oh yeah, I have to pay for my glasses, and I'm a glasses user for 1 year. I never had to wear glasses until last year.
Bought this from India, bro.
Yeah, I only have one pair of glasses, and like I'm really, I think about like, I mean, I can afford it. It just seems horrible to have to wait. Like I don't want to wait weeks for something to ship. And yeah, I forget the issue. I forget which one at hand, but glasses are an issue where it's a specific monopoly issue with why I think consumers, I mean, in other countries, they have like universal models where they like pay for glasses in the UK through the NHS and stuff. But I think even for like purchasing power for what European like healthcare agencies pay versus what Americans pay per bulk, we pay 5 times more. And it's just because 3 firms control the glasses market, stuff like that.
So in India, it's a luxury. I think it feels like in India, everyone has 2 glasses. One, and I have 1 spare. I got 1 spare for this. I think it's a luxury in America. You're spending like $200, $300, $400 for like 2 glasses, 2 lenses.
Literally.
Yeah. Crazy. So yeah, but what is happening? Like, do you think monopolies have always existed, or do you think something peculiar is happening right now in the world with the monopolies? And maybe in tech, obviously, and on which you're working, but also beyond tech, do you think the current inflation is kind of a result of that? What is peculiar about the monopolies of today's time?
I think in the context of just thinking monopolies historically, I mean, in a pre-capitalist era, and I don't mean like, pre Iron Age. I'm thinking in terms of like somewhat modern, and let's say last 2,000 years, at least when thinking
Industrial.
yeah, like thinking in the context of old world societies to be this like Europe, like like post Roman era, blah blah blah. Mainly, I'm just thinking in terms of like we've had monopolies in the sense that in a pre-capitalist kind of social arrangement where you still had kind of advanced social structures in the forms of kingdoms and whatnot. I mean, commerce would be monopolistic because a lot of it would be literally just be given seal, like certain commercial activities would just be given seals of approval
Seal of
by
the
like
king.
the king.
Seal of the king, seal of the church. Yeah.
Exactly. And like the Netherlands and the UK and like the early modern period were really like at the very top where you would just have like the royal the Royal India Company. Yeah, stuff like that where they would just give like for
East India Company. Yeah.
And the context of like in context of like well, I mean, when we even think about what capitalism is in the context of like Europe, in the context of feudalism, it was kind of a disruption because all of a sudden you had like an emerging merchant class that was challenging the dominance of like the landed aristocracy in Europe. And this is like the 1800s. And by the time in America, because America is like this young, really emerging economy, that's where you first really see the issue of monopolies come up around like 1860s, 70s, 80s, because you see the railroads are fueling the entire American economy as the country moves west and, explodes in population and economic growth. So you just see these, we called them robber barons back then, because you would just see these like, giants, the John Rockefellers of the world. I assume that Rockefeller is known internationally. Or JP Morgan, all of these people we call. And a lot of them obviously have like stuff named after them now, but the Andrew Carnegies of them all, who would just basically, they would do something there where they would form trusts, is what they call that. No one uses the term trust in this context. Antitrust is a weird, antiquated term. The idea was that a trust was like basically like a collection of companies under the control of one person, i.e. it was kind of like the divisions between them were fake. It would usually be, you'd have these like monopolists in the 1880s, they would have railroad trusts where they would like the Grand Pacific Railroad Company, the Grand Central Railroad Company, they'd all be technically separate, but they weren't. They were all just owned by one person under a trust. And this was, clearly a massive issue with in the 1880s when like income inequality was being identified as an issue. It's like that led to the first antitrust law. So it was John Sherman created the Sherman Antitrust Act. And that still forms the basis of our antitrust law. The issue with that is that, like, not to go too far ahead, but the issue with that is that the main antitrust law is the Sherman Antitrust Law of 1890. That was well before, that's 1890. We can't even envision what an iPhone would be in 1890. It was hard back then to identify how monopoly power could work in the context of something like Facebook, which you don't have to physically pay for Facebook. Your data is leveraged for them to profit off of, but it's free at point of service. So that's why there's a push to update the antitrust laws, because it's hard to show that like Facebook has basically monopolized users' data for 15 years, and that precludes other social media companies from really emerging as rivals, or other ad tech companies, because it goes so far beyond just social media. So the issue with that, or Amazon, is that antitrust laws are so outdated in America, they can't really apply too well to the current situation. And there's something called the Consumer Welfare Standard in the last 50 years, where the US courts, as people who are familiar with like, the current push to just like overturn Roe v. Wade. Like the courts have been kind of captured by right-wing interests for like the past like 50 years. That's been their main strategies, is total corporate power over the judiciary. And the judiciary has weaponized antitrust laws against concentration to go against unions at one point. That was a really early thing where they were like, oh, wow, these laws are designed to stop corporate monopolies. Let's stop labor monopolies. It's a nonsensical term, but yeah, they've always tried to weaponize antitrust. And in the last 50 years, antitrust has become really defanged. And that's why we've seen these corporate monopolies like Amazon emerge, is because they go by the consumer welfare standard. And under this logic, a monopoly is not harmful if it leads to lower consumer prices. And this is a bad idea, because the idea is like, you know, back then railroad monopolies meant that they could really jack up the prices however they want if there's no railroad competition. But, you know, Amazon, I mean, they're lowering prices for consumers, so it's fine if they kind of engage in like really anti-competitive tactics that are basically illegal to screw over small businesses. But a lot of people, Lena Khan, who's now the FTC chair, she pointed out that Amazon's monopoly power, even if it doesn't lead to higher consumer prices, even if it actually lowers it, there's still a lot of harm in curbing competition, because she pointed out with the book industry, as we all know, Amazon started out, its main claim to fame in the 90s was with books. Yeah. She documented how since Amazon really monopolized the book distribution industry, it has really changed the rest of the literary industry itself, and it's led to literature. It's led to literary established companies taking less of a risk on, you know, more unconventional proposals for books and stuff like that. Kind of the idea that monopoly power is harmful to creativity and harmful to innovation. And you see that in, as everyone knows, it's like, people joke about how every movie in North American cinema is the same superhero movie every time over. And I mean, that is basically a result of, you know, I mean, Disney acquiring Marvel, and, you know, Disney further acquiring Amazon just acquired MGM, which is like the, you know MGM, right? The line.
Yeah, MGM.
Yeah, so that's an issue. It's like monopoly power is harmful to creativity, and that's bad for reasons well beyond the arts. That's bad for reasons of tech. I mean, like, not that I'm someone to glorify Steve Jobs, who is someone who, by all accounts, was a very abusive person in his personal capacity, but he was and there's the issue of just like early IP stuff, but Steve Jobs was a very creative and intelligent person, and if he was around today, realistically, what would have happened is he'd probably get enough money from investors to create a nice startup. One of the 4 big tech companies would be terrified that this startup would actually grow to be a competitor to them. So they would do what we call kill and acquire. Facebook kills and acquires startups all the time. And this is a strategy where it's like tens of thousands of like killer acquisitions, as we call them, of these big tech companies. And not to like, I do not definitely not want to use like the logic of like, you know, national security and nationalism in this sense. But one of the things is that like, when it comes to areas where, since America outsources a lot of its like stuff like artificial intelligence and, you know, cybersecurity stuff to companies in the country, I mean, it is a good point that like, it is definitely not in America's national security interests that we are allowing like Amazon, Facebook, Google, Apple to just kind of like monopolize fields like AI, because they're just killing startups from people who have really good ideas, stuff like that. And on the other hand, you have China, which actually is reining in its 4 big tech giants. I don't know if you followed that, but like Huawei, Alibaba have been under like huge Chinese government scrutiny. And stuff like that. And, you know, not that I'm praising like the Chinese model of governance whatsoever, but this is really just like, when we think about big tech, I think that that's the most important one to focus on when it comes to monopoly power now, because it kind of brings the point about how monopolies can be harmful, even if it doesn't result in you personally having to pay more, because you're going to be paying more through, you know, less innovation, less chances for small businesses. And with Amazon, you know, screwing over local economies, stuff like that. And it's a really interesting subject matter, but so that's an issue I focus a lot on. And with inflation, yeah, and I'll, not want to go dwell too much on this, but yeah, like Biden has pointed out that like the oil monopolies have been pretty clearly just been price gouging at this point. Um, and obviously we just need to, get off the oil industry reliance in general. But unfortunately, when it comes to oil, I think Americans pay something like 30% of their personal money on transportation costs, as opposed to like 8% for Europeans, largely because of how
Right.
much fucking oil they have to pay. Yeah, it's an issue itself. But yeah, it's just very clear that like monopoly power has exploded since the 80s in America because they've kind of the courts have let them, and now there's a real push to rein it in with Facebook, Google, Apple, Amazon, and yeah, it's super interesting.
But why should the person on the street care, right? Like, how would you get the person on the street to care about antitrust laws? How can you explain them how the monopolies are bad? What will they do to them? On the top of my head, what I can think is can you imagine if MySpace had bought Facebook back in the day? So not that we have Facebook right now, not saying it's a good thing or a bad thing, but imagine if Yahoo had bought Google back in the day, you wouldn't have Google today. So what these companies are applying, the tactics they're applying today, what if someone would have applied back in the day, they wouldn't have existed, right? With the tactics that they're applying right now, they came to this position because there was fair competition back in the day. At least when the world of the web was new and everyone started from the same base, right? That's where these companies now it's not really that level playing field anymore. And any cool idea is being bought off, any cool competitor is being bought off, and sure, they'll give you services for free. They will give you, see, that's what happened with Paytm in India, right? Everyone started using Paytm because Paytm started giving cashbacks and everything, and now all of a sudden now people are addicted to it. Paytm has acquired all the startups that are competing them. Now Paytm is charging like what, 1% on every transaction. So that is also a strategy. Monopolies will like get you used to something cheap, and once you're addicted to that convenience, now then they'll start charging like
exactly.
That's what I see from my dumb knowledge of whatever I have. And also like because of that, cool innovation will obviously stop, because if there is an innovation that's going to hurt their business model, they're going to buy and kill it off. Like, one of the earliest examples I could think was like, the GM Motors buying all the tram systems of America and killing the tram streetcar culture itself, so that they could, sell more cars or whatever, right? So, what is a common person on the road losing because of the monopolies?
For sure. I mean, I think the main thing is people are aware of it to some extent, but there is just such an issue with how deep data collection is on just user data being monopolized and stuff. And we're really seeing with abortion being at threat. I mean, it's effectively on verge of being banned in half of the entire country. We're seeing stuff like how user data collection and how Google and Facebook just selling data to data brokers, even though it's technically against their rules in some cases, they still get away with it. We've seen cases where someone was almost imprisoned in Mississippi in 2018 after they had a miscarriage for allegedly trying to induce abortion. And back then, Roe v. Wade was still on the books, but Mississippi was still trying to cause like a constitutional crisis. And their evidence was that she supposedly looked up the term abortion on Google search. Stuff like that. This is going to be one of the clearest examples of how violations of data privacy has such like a extreme virulent effect on people's own livelihoods. In the case of Amazon, I mean, more and more people are seeing every day of how Amazon is just monopolizing in their communities. I mean, like, even, Amazon Fresh.
Yeah.
Do you have Whole Foods in Canada?
They may be in different form, but I don't know as of now.
Do you know?
Let's just say
Whole Foods?
Yeah, I know what the idea about Whole Foods.
And Amazon acquired Whole Foods in 2017. But Amazon, I was reading the other day, Amazon's going to start putting Amazon Fresh grocery stores next to Whole Foods grocery stores owned by Amazon. They're going to start putting them like on the same block, just so they can literally saturate entire markets. and of course, some of this does sound academic, but on the other hand, most people like when they have small, like independent or small, even regional chain grocery stores in their vicinity. But like, yeah, I think the main issue with this is just like um, antitrust. We use the term like kitchen table issue in the US to describe like an issue that's intimately something that families talk about on the kitchen table, you know, just higher consumer prices, stuff like that. And someone made the joke where it's like, well, everyone nowadays is looking at their phone when they're at the kitchen table. Like big tech antitrust is a kitchen table issue, as long as like people's data is just being systemically abused and sold to third-party brokers. People don't like, most people have very rudimentary understandings of cookies and just the idea of tracking in general. But most people get creeped out, especially people who are above like the age of 50, get really creeped out when they look up something and then they're bombarded with similar shit for like 6 days afterwards.
Yeah.
But I think it's just important that like the solution to this isn't, you know, people talk about how we need big tech regulation. And the issue with that is like the big tech companies are like some of the not just like the largest enterprises on earth now, they're just some of the most powerful entities in human history.
They are the new Rockefellers or Carnegie Mellons or whatever, right?
They're like, their market caps are like, in many ways, these Facebook, Amazon, Google, Apple are functionally countries at some level or another. They're kind of independent and sovereign. They absolutely, like normal corporations already know how to water down regulation. We call it corporate capture, when they push through fake regulatory bills and then get allies to positions that will regulate them. Absolutely, of course, the big tech companies are going to do that if you create a digital regulatory body. We literally know for a fact that Facebook has been proposing this. They're like, no, just don't do antitrust, don't break us up, don't force us to, you know, divest Instagram, WhatsApp, or whatever. Just create, like, we all want privacy, just create like a digital privacy agency. And it's like, no, what you're going to do is you just want Facebook lawyers to be the digital. We know how the revolving door works. It will literally be people who, there's plenty of Facebook lawyers who are already in the federal government now. And it's like, the only thing you can do, you need to challenge their economic power. We can do all we want, but it's like, the federal government in America, most of these agencies like the FTC, they barely have any funding now to even mount challenges. The FTC is suing Facebook, and Facebook has more power than the FTC, which is why they keep getting like the court state pushback. They have unlimited money for lawyers and other areas where they can do legal obstacles. But yeah, just like at the core of it is that like you need to challenge the economic power of these giants. Otherwise, they are not going to do anything if you try to regulate them. And we know this because I don't know if you followed, but you know the Match Group?
Yeah, the Tinder parent.
Tinder and Hinge. Yeah, it's the it owns both Tinder and Hinge, like the dating apps. They're in a long-standing feud with Apple and Google because Apple and Google both do like insane commission fees for apps, like 30% for both of them. It's shitty and it's predatory, obviously, because they have monopolies on both of them for the operating systems they own and stuff.
Yeah.
So in the Netherlands, because that's one of the jurisdictions they've been suing, the Netherlands agreed with the Match Group that, yeah, this is anti-competitive. You should not be able to, you need to reduce the fees well down from 30%. And this is in January, I think, of this year. And the Netherlands told Apple, we will fine you 5 million euros for every single week that you do not change the App Store, your App Store policies that we found illegal. A week later, they didn't do it. So it rose to 10 million euros. Oh, another week, 15 million, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, 50, which was the maximum. Apple literally let itself take $50 million, 50 million euros, excuse me, in fines because it just did not, it has basically unlimited resources. It has still not changed that policy because it is more powerful than the competition regulator in the Netherlands, because it's not a company in this common sense. It is basically a sovereign entity at this point. It's the largest, I think, besides Saudi Aramco, it's the single most valuable company on earth. It has like a $3 trillion market cap. Like it can do whatever it wants, basically, unless you literally challenge its economic power. But yeah, stuff like that, where it's like, and that's why there's a huge push in South Korea and the US with the Open App Markets Act to try and rein in what they're doing with the app markets, because it's just like, if you have an operating system that you have built in and you only let users use the app marketplace that you also built in, and you use that app marketplace to do these insane predatory fines for third-party apps while privileging, we call it self-preferencing, the apps Google or Apple, in their case, makes themselves.
Editor's choice, Google's choice.
Monopoly. Yeah, like it's like, of course it's a monopoly issue, and they'll be like, well, users benefit from this, and it's like, you've cornered the market. Like Apple and like Android and iOS have like probably 95% of like the market share in this. And when you think about like how Google even became like a monopoly in the search engine in the first place, they literally would just delist rival search engines. Then they would use their search engines to unfairly boost Google shopping at the expense of other shopping. Like there's so much into this, and that's why I keep kind of going on tangents, because it's just like,
no, that's good. That's yeah.
Like the four big tech, it's like I'm barely even scratching the surface. Like it's really insane stuff, and the monopoly power is a huge issue elsewhere in the sense of like telecoms. I mean, it's insane. Like, as you probably can
talk
see, like,
about telecoms. Let me go off a little. Let me rant a little bit about Canada's telecoms, because there are basically three telecoms right here. I mean, it's just Rogers and Bell and Jet. The pricing here is just insane. I don't know how much you're paying in America, but here, like for 5G, you get 5G in UK for like £30, unlimited 5G data. Here you're paying like $100. $100 for like barely 20-30 gigs of 5G data. It is crazy.
Yeah, and those are like, I definitely want to learn both more about consolidation, because besides tech, I think the other two egregious ones are telecoms, and just thinking about how like media consolidation and how these are all just absolutely.
Someone made a merger, right? Fox and who made a merger? I forgot. I totally.
Is it 21st? I'm forgetting too, because I would like to get a better sense of that. I've been planning on just
and talk about India. If Indian users can remember when the cell phone services started out new 10 years ago, we literally had 6 options to choose from. We had Idea, Vodafone, Hutch, Airtel, Aircel, whatnot. Now it's just boiled down to Ambani's company and Airtel is struggling to keep up with Ambani's company. Trust me on that. And India is also becoming this monopoly playground where Ambani and Adani just own just every freaking thing.
I was also reading about speaking in monopoly power, because I'd like to learn more about Ambani, and I was kind of just reading about how monopoly power in other country. Do you know who Aliko Dangote is? I hope I'm pronouncing his name right. He's the richest person in Nigeria. He's a monopolist. He's really interesting. He's really interesting because he's kind of like a cartoon parody of a monopolist. He's the single richest person in Nigeria and Africa by far. He has a net worth of $6 billion. So he's like 70th richest person on earth. As a result, he's the person that Bill Gates or, the Carlyle Group, if they want to do anything in Africa, they will speak to him. He's just known anywhere in Africa that you go to Dangote first. And he has a monopoly. The Dangote Group controls cement in the country, and also a lot of just the world's cement is what he produces through the Dangote Group. And then he's also monopolized sugar and, refineries, basically every of these like industries in Nigeria. And what's really interesting about him is that also he has like total political power. Of all the past 4 presidents of Nigeria, he's always declined to run for president in his own right, because he's literally just more powerful, just pulling the strings behind it. But what's really interesting about him to me is reading about how the Dangote Group, even though it has like absolute complete market dominance in Nigeria, it invests almost nothing on R&D. It does not do anything to try and see, like, how can we make cement products better? How can we lower prices? They're like a parody of a monopoly. They don't do any of that. It's literally parasitic shit where he gets favors from the government to corner off any competitors. There's no investment in anything. And he leverages, his public image in the same way that like the Gateses and the Bezoses and everyone in the American billionaires do. He's kind of created an image of himself as some sort of like workaholic altruist, and he's not. And people have uncovered that he's always at yacht parties. It's bullshit. All of their stories are just
billionaires and their PRs. Like I don't know. Is he the African Elon Musk? I don't know, because Elon Musk.
Elon Musk. I mean, Elon Musk is a repulsive human being. I mean, he's just an absolute piece of shit. And Musk is someone who is like, and I'm fine just like being totally, because Musk is just like Tesla is just insane. Where like, I don't know if you follow like Tesla's stock price. It is insane. The valuation of it is literally like, I have no conceivable understanding of how it's been this high for this long. It is not even like, when you see like Rivian, like Rivian, the new Amazon-backed electric car company.
Okay, not heard.
Yeah, it's what Amazon is gonna. Amazon doesn't own it, but Amazon is backing it, and it's gonna be producing Amazon's electric vans for delivery. So Rivian debuted last year, had a huge IPO because people are like, yeah, this is gonna be really cool. The IPO fell back to earth. It's at like 25% of what it actually was. Tesla has not even remotely matched like its valuation. It has like a PE ratio of 100, something that is literally like insane. And it's just because people see Elon Musk as a cool celebrity. They're literally just like fans of him. Like buying a Tesla stock is like buying like tickets to an Elon Musk concert. You know what I mean? Like it's not really like, no one would be doing it at this rate if it was actually going to match earnings, because of course it's not. It's going to deflate massively. It already is starting to. But it's like, yeah, and with Musk, it's just like, and Musk is someone who's almost an OG, like kind of like a railroad monopolist, because he's not even incorporating all of these as one company. These are all just SpaceX now, hopefully in his standard, hopefully not for the rest of us, Twitter, Tesla. They're not even going to be one company. It's just going to be his personal holdings. Like this is really Rockefeller type stuff. It's not even what modern monopolists do, which is just, endless mergers and acquisitions under one corporation. But it's like, I think the Dan Doty example in Nigeria is really interesting, because that's one where there's just not even a theoretical kind of sense of, he's not reinvesting any of it in helping people. I mean, he hires a lot of people. That tends to what happens when you have a large company, but like, it's not helping Nigeria, which is obviously like it's a growing country, but obviously is still plagued by.
I never understood people, nationalist people in India. An Indian is the richest person in the world. I'm like, what is the point?
Yeah, exactly. It's like, it's not benefiting anyone. Like for Ambani to be like that, it's also not benefiting anyone that's like, yeah, I've seen like, I mean, I come across like kind of Indian nationalist memes and stuff where it's just like, if you're on Twitter enough, you'll see weird Indian nationalist content. I think everyone has seen like weird balked like RSS memes praising Israel, where they're like, India and Israel are brothers, and it's just like Shah Rukh Khan photoshopped doing a handshake with like fucking Netanyahu and stuff. It's so weird. It's like weird WhatsApp content.
That's a different topic altogether. But the funny defense that people, the defenders of the great defenders of capitalism make is that capitalism brings like choices. There are so many choices to choose from in capitalism. Like, no, have a look around. Where are you shopping from? Walmart. Where are you getting your furniture from? IKEA. You're not getting from Uncle John. Where are you getting your cars from? Ford. Some Hyundai, Toyota, like what, 3-4 brands. Where is your bulk shopping happening? Costco. It's just there is literally the 80% of shopping I do after I've come here. I've realized this in North America. 80% of shopping I do, from groceries to clothing, it's just some big store bigger than a football ground, and is only 20% the only stuff I buy from mom and pop or the Indian stuff, because there is no Indian store monopoly here. So I have to go to some mom and pop shop and buy the Indian stuff. But otherwise, 80% of the shopping I do is just from giant store with equally giant parking. It's crazy.
Literally, yeah. And like, yeah, not even to go off topic, but yeah, as you'll notice in North America, we just have these like massive horizontal spaces for monopoly grocery stores with parking lots that are 3 times that size. You could probably fit 20,000 people, not even an exaggeration, if you did dense housing. You don't even need to have Manhattan like towers. If you just had normal So if you just had decent zoning laws
Picket
and
fence
shit,
houses.
and yeah, you could literally have like, especially this is even worse. And what's sad is like Toronto, this is still better than 99.9% of America, of North America, in terms of like density. And it's still even there. Even if you go like a little eastward for me in Queens and Brooklyn, you'll still have these massive, parking lot places and stuff. But it's like, yeah, I think with monopolies, it is just like, yeah, there is an illusion of choice. And it's amazing how, like you said, how it's still being maintained even after Amazon and stuff acquires every last startup and stuff. And nowadays, the only time for social media, the only time a real competitor can emerge if it's in the parallel Chinese market in Shenzhen. That's why TikTok is viable, because it's ByteDance. TikTok could not possibly be a viable company if it was like a startup in San Francisco, but it is.
Absolutely.
It would obviously just be acquired by Facebook. It probably would not have even been incorporated as Reels then. It would probably have just been killed or neglected, like what they always do with these companies.
Oh my God. Like everything you use, the WhatsApp is Facebook's, the Facebook, Instagram is Facebook's. Facebook has started dating. I'm like,
Facebook
dude.
dating, yeah.
Oh my God.
And it goes so far, but yeah. And what's crazy is just like, yeah, when you use Google, I mean, people, do you use Android or Apple for your phone? Like, what do you personally use?
I have switched over to iOS right now, just for the first time, just to see what this is all about.
I mean, honestly, I vastly prefer it. I mean, like, I think that like Apple products are just like better in terms of
overpriced, but good.
Oh, absolutely. Surprisingly, a lot of like the newer Androids are more expensive than iPhones, and it's really weird that people have it. But it is a funny thing. Do you know of like the controversy with the blue messaging versus the green messaging?
No idea.
Okay, you know how on like iMessage it comes out as a blue bubble, but if it's from like another phone, it's green. That's literally, there's a whole controversy, and this is a competition thing that Apple has done purposefully to create a status symbol where only iMessages will come in blue, so that they can.
Oh, the elitism of iPhone is a different podcast topic. We'll do that someday,
Oh, but I think this is like but this actually is like a serious antitrust issue, because they were saying that like it's in iMessage should not be allowed to, like, that it is anti-competitive for iMessage to only be able to be downloaded from iOS through the app marketplace that is, of course, is only available to iOS. That's actually what they're bringing up in a lot of these antitrust topics, and why they're like how Apple is basically trying to just like monopolize even further its position in the phone industry. But yeah, I think stuff like that's interesting, because like the antitrust tech stuff, it really touches upon everything. We talk about Facebook misinformation, and it's like, yeah, because it's like Facebook is allowed to just be this like disgusting cesspool of misinformation, because it and Google have an ad tech monopoly, basically. So that means advertisers who object to Facebook being used to spread racist and hate speech, it's just not viable for them not to use Facebook. In 2020, a bunch of advertisers tried to do a boycott of Facebook during the George Floyd Black Lives Matter protest, because Facebook would not remove like some of like Trump's really disturbing speech at the time. And the advertisers tried it, but they eventually had to break after a month, because like that was
where else are you going to advertise?
You can't go. Exactly. So it's like everything, hate speech is an antitrust issue. Misinformation is an antitrust issue. All of this stuff is an antitrust issue. And when we were thinking about like an issue that I and some of my coworkers are working on, that's kind of an emerging thing. Have you seen like the prototype of the Apple Car?
Kind of. What about it?
So that's the new thing. Not a lot of people are talking about this, but I'm doing a lot of work on this right now with a few people who really care about this issue, and I'm thinking of like writing an op-ed on it soon. What big tech sees as for big tech companies, what they see as the very last horizon for them, the very last thing that they can join in with, because they're already at like $1 trillion market caps. What more can you grow? Their thing is they want to go into auto now, and they want to monopolize every aspect of people's driving experience. And as you know, I hate driving. I do not like car infrastructure in general. But this is just going to make it worse, because you see, Apple wants to do the Apple Car. They want to do the autonomous. They want to have it like be this sleek Apple Car experience. We already have Android Auto being installed in all these like newer cars. Same with like And the issue with that is like, and Amazon is backing Rivian, which is the startup, or I guess it's now a public company of electric cars, and they want to just kind of like crush Ford and all like the established American auto monopolist and then incorporate it into their own monopoly power. And the issue with this is that like, this is going to be the worst kind of horrifying dystopian data surveillance ever. And we know this because like, already in the last few years, newer computerized cars, like a lot of insurance companies now are starting to incorporate like insanely elaborate data down to the millisecond of how someone decelerates on their brakes or how long they put a turn signal on, and they're recalibrating insurance quotes based on this. I think
really.
Yeah, I think Progressive Insurance did the launch program for this like 2 years ago as a thing where it's like, if you take off we'll take off $50 from your car insurance monthly if you agree to enroll in our pilot program or whatever. Like, this is not even a conspiracy. This is literally what they're going to do. Is they're going to have this elaborate data.
So it's like we're going to bump up your insurance price by $30 because you decelerated too fast or accelerated too fast. At that
Stuff
point,
like that is already happening in its incumbency. But like, yeah, we're literally going to be seeing, that's the computerization of cars. That's even as scary as like, and that's why we're already having like Android Auto is already auto installed in a lot of newer cars. And they have all these kinds of like, I don't know if you follow like Apple keys, but I think there's some exclusivity agreements with like Hyundai and Apple of how like newer Hyundais, I mean, obviously they'll still have keys for the Hyundais or whatever, but if you want to do it through your phone, you better have an iPhone instead of an Android, because we're only going to be allowing the Hyundai keys digital app to be on iOS. They're already doing shit like that.
You are making me reverse my opinions on technology being the part of the car, because I was actually delighted with the idea that, you know, the one thing I liked about, I've rented a Tesla and I've went on a ride. There are things I liked about it, there are things I hated about it. One thing I actually liked about it, it's like a moving mobile phone, basically.
Yeah.
What I didn't realize is that it's also collecting the data on my driving habits. And I don't want Elon Musk to know my driving habits. Like, the hell.
Yeah, and I think that like I've only been in a Tesla once. I think that I'm strongly opposed, unless this is 30 years in the future or whatever, to the existence of fully automatic cars. And as you know Waymo, how Google's doing the self-driving car right now, with the Google Waymo service. This is a litigation thing that because I follow this shit really closely. This is not even in like major papers. I just get like legal alerts about this shit. Waymo was suing the state of California, Google's Waymo, because there's so many of these Waymo self-driving car crashes. They sued the state of California from releasing records on car crashes because they claimed it was a state secret. And Google won. The California Superior Court said, yeah, this is a trade secret. How many times they keep crashing cars is not something the public deserves to know. So it's stuff like that that's just like horrifying. I think that like partial partial like AV, excuse me, not AR. I think that has like potential just for, not letting people slide into lanes and stuff, but the fully AV stuff is horrifying, like at least for the near future. And either way, we should not ever have to rely on AV. We need trains. But yeah, like I think that the big tech auto push is one of the creepiest things we're seeing in the 2020s. Apple's going to be launching the Apple Car in its own, it claims 2025, could very well be much later. I mean, these time frames never stick, but like,
I think I'm a fan of automatic driving because I can eat chips while driving. I can watch a movie. But I think the transition will be very tough. Automated driving is good when all cars are automated, maybe when the cars are communicating with each other. I don't know. But yeah, I've never thought about the negative side of automated driving, but I'll think about it now.
The data collection thing is just so awful. Like, yeah, the thing.
Data collection is definitely like, yeah,
and that goes beyond just like modern. Because I mean, I've never actually really even driven like a newer car. Like, I don't come from a wealthy background, so I'd always drive a 2008 Camry, which with like an aux cord, not even like full Bluetooth and stuff. But yeah, like even now with everything having like, so many cars have Android Auto pre-installed. And I think in Italy, they're suing Google about that. Like every jurisdiction in the world is suing about this shit now. And India is like, I'm interested really in what India is doing, because India is like we see so much. The EU and the US are really the EU has been leading the fight against Google for years. They're really aggressive about that stuff. South Korea is now really getting big on that. Japan only slightly. Japan's not actually doing that much regulatory activity. But I see so much. I see news stories, just these kind of quiet things, because I monitor it daily, about like the CCI investigating Amazon or Google, or just parliamentary. I think the Lok Sabha, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, excuse me, that they're doing like a hearing on Facebook and misinformation right now. And I think that India is like, obviously it's the largest market for this since China is closed off. I think that India could definitely should and can be kind of like the leader in hopefully regulating these and reining in big tech.
I have very less hope, but let's see how it goes. And just my relationship with driving has got a little weirder now after what you said about data collection. I was just searching for a meme while we were talking. I don't know if you remember this particular meme. Sorry. You know, all the companies controlled by.
Oh yeah.
You remember
I have
this?
seen that.
You must have seen that. So that's very it's very sad, because
crazy
again, even the PepsiCo and Coca-Cola are the same company, right? Essentially, but it just gets worse and worse, and all the dreams that we had, that the world in the future is going to be so lovely with full of innovation. It's not going to be full of innovation when there are only 2-3 companies that are not that interested in innovation. They're only interested in their own profit. And they're only going to encourage the innovation that will benefit them, not necessarily benefit the people,
And what's crazy about it is just like looking at just like how much bigger Google and like how much bigger these companies are in terms of valuation. Like by like, I'm thinking of like, I'm trying to look up right now what the valuation of ExxonMobil is. And obviously ExxonMobil is one of the single powerful companies on planet Earth. Valuation of ExxonMobil is, let's see. Yeah, like ExxonMobil reported a market valuation of 260 billion. Apple has 3 trillion. Like these are ExxonMobil. Every company that you think of that is the largest is literally like a baby compared to Apple and Amazon. These companies are so massive that the only comparable market caps are Saudi Aramco or some of the Chinese-backed state. I think like what's the Chinese oil company? Is it Petrocene?
CPEC or
Sinopec, yeah, I think that's it. But when you look at like the market caps of the largest companies on Earth, it's like the big tech companies make even like the big oil, they make them look like little babies. And like now you're seeing Amazon trying to go into agriculture. Like it's literally just insane what the 4 big tech.
This is just a colonization in a different sense, basically.
Yeah, I agree with that. Well, because about the Amazon in South Africa right now, they're trying to build a whole Amazon HQ on like Khoi ancestral land. It's a huge like tribal fight of people in like the Western Cape, kind of near Cape Town, of indigenous peoples. And it's like, yeah, this is kind of a good metaphor for colonization. And also in Facebook, you see like, you should read the Times story. I don't know if you saw the Times story about like Facebook's like horrifying abuse of moderation workers in Kenya, because obviously they're outsourcing everything to low-income countries to do moderation work. Facebook moderation work is one of the worst jobs in human history. Everyone says that it's like the single most like, it literally has like the highest increase in like clinical depression of any job, just because of how much horrifying, violent, hateful stuff that you have to see. And they're paying people like $2 a day in Kenya to do this now. And of course, they're like, well, Kenya is a low income economy. We don't want to create inflation in it. And the Kenyan activists are like, no, this is insanely low, even by the standards. This is insanely predatory, even if Nairobi is a low income. These are absolutely obscenely low figures. Facebook is abusing these people. And we finally have a whistleblower about how Facebook is like basically allowing human traffic, like just the most repulsive, revelations. And I just see this stuff every day because this is the issue that I really just work most intimately about. And it's just like the 4 big tech companies, like even like Twitter is like a baby, like Twitter as a market cap, like a little child's compared to the rest of these companies. But like Alphabet, Google, Meta Technologies and shit. Yeah, and about the Meta thing, it's like, because I'm sure you're familiar with like the metaverse idea and stuff. The metaverse thing is insane because it's like, did you ever watch the trailer for Zuckerberg's metaverse announcement that was going?
I could not dare, but go
What
ahead.
was really insane about it to me is that like that commercial was not a. It was not a like they. I don't know if you remember this, but it was like Facebook announced the Meta rebranding in right when there was the whole whistleblower leaks about. So this was to do to kind of like spin everything and say we're a new company, but it's so much more sinister than even that because like the metaverse video, it was not a commercial for anything. It was a cartoon movie about a fictional technology he thinks he can create in 10 years. And the entire point of that is that like, and it's hugely, Facebook is doing horribly financially at the moment since January. I don't know if you've been following Facebook stock price and stuff because Zuckerberg is just obsessed with this metaverse shit. But it's not totally a fool's errand because like AR and VR are definitely going to grow in the next 10 years. So even if Facebook takes losses in the meantime, they're still going to be monopolizing attention for AR and VR away from any startups that can promise it. That's the entire point of that. Is just
I think they got Oculus Rift. That is exactly where they got Oculus Rift, right? Long back.
Yeah, and like Oculus is like an acquired thing. Yeah, exactly. And that's the other thing is like big tech apologists. I see because I work on this. All the big tech lobbies. The big tech lobby is so elaborate. They do the most elaborate shit. There was a Washington Post reported this week about how Facebook is doing AstroTurf campaigns across the country, paying people in small newspapers to say, I'm a small business and support Facebook. Google and Facebook have been doing this a lot because they're scared of the 2 antitrust bills that I've been talking about. And with Facebook, it's like their lobbying arm is so insanely elaborate. There's so many of these companies that so many of these fake organizations they fund, and they're always like, big tech is creating innovation, and if you break up big tech, China wins, this kind of bullshit. But it's like big tech does, even when the big tech companies come out with good stuff, they're not innovating, they're just buying innovation. Like in the case, it's the case where they do acquire a startup and actually use its technology. In other cases, they buy a startup because they're scared and then they kill that technology. But there's nothing that comes in-house from Facebook at this point, obviously. Like Facebook is just like a predatory monopolist. I mean, this is what these companies are.
Let's talk a little bit about Amazon, actually.
Yeah.
Like how on earth is possibly Amazon keeping all the prices so low for all the products? What is it doing? Can you please throw some light on that?
Sure.
Because Mr. Bezos has not got the attention in this episode yet. So
yeah, and of course, so with Amazon is like, do you know what the term predatory pricing is?
you know what? It'll come to my mind while as you go on telling.
So this is actually a perfect example. Yeah, and this is a perfect discussion of antitrust because like predatory pricing was explicitly banned in the 1890s. And predatory pricing was when a monopoly company would intentionally like sell stuff at like 1% of what a new company is selling, something that will sustain massive amounts of losses, but will crush the other company in the end. So in the end, it works for the monopolist. That's how Amazon conquered. You want to know it? You want to know the last product that Amazon conquered was that they had the hardest time doing anything? It was diapers for some reason. Okay. It was 2012. Diapers.com was where most Americans were buying diapers from digitally. Amazon did this really elaborate predatory pricing scheme where they took on like 300 million in losses just selling diapers for like basically pennies, and they killed diapers.com, and now they're a monopolist there too. Predatory pricing is technically illegal, but like I said, the courts are all stacked with right-wing hacks, so you
because now they're like, consumers are getting it for cheap price. What's your problem?
Precisely, and yeah, we call the consumer welfare standard. It's bullshit. But you're completely on the nose. That's their logic. So with Amazon, with Amazon, for the most part, they have been able to keep prices low, but seller fees have been getting higher and higher in the last, I think it's literally doubled. ILSR, the Institute for Local Self-Reliance, which is a great great anti-monopoly organization, they're showing how Amazon just keeps ripping off sellers more and more, including Amazon literally, because Amazon also self-preferences in the same way that Google does through Google Play Store or Apple through the App Store.
Amazon's choice, Amazon's preference. Prime.
And Amazon is like Amazon unequivocally also literally just robs IP of small sellers. Like they actually just completely take inventions and sell them as their own under the Amazon label or under this bunch of like secret Amazon products that aren't technically
Amazon Basics.
Yeah, shit like that. And it's so deep and stuff, but it's like for Amazon, they've mostly been able to keep prices low by not just because they like horrifically abuse their workers, but also they're just ripping off sellers more and more. And I don't know how sustainable this would be. I have no idea, but like, who's going to challenge them if it's not going to be antitrust telling them no? That no one will. At some point, they're going to be fucking. It'll be 2050, and they'll be charging sellers 40%. Who knows at this point?
And because they don't have any other place left to sell, basically. Because real estate is pricing out stores, and only these companies have the power to buy the land and put up their stores. It just looks so bad for it's capitalism. The defenders of capitalism again come with the idea that entrepreneur spirit is what capitalism pushes, and this monopoly culture is basically a threat to entrepreneurship itself, right? So like what hope do you have? Because if you may have all the dreams, but at the end of the day, you're going to sell your company for like $500 million and sit in a mansion, but you are not going anywhere with your idea, right? So that's
exactly, and that's why we're like huge push in Congress. It's actually rare bipartisan bills. We have American Innovation and Choice Online Act. There are a bunch of more antitrust bills this session. It's actually like this is a rare example where we actually have a bunch of Republicans coming out in support, mostly for dumb reasons, because they talk about woke corporations, like stupid shit, but whatever, we'll take it. We need the votes in the Senate to pass this. The issue is there's just so much on the docket that even though the American Innovation and Choice Online Act, which would ban the 4 big tech companies from self-preferencing, even though it has the votes to pass, it might not actually make it to a floor vote, meaning like on the floor of the Senate and the House, because Schumer and Pelosi have like other issues they need to get to. So because of that, the bill could die. And then from there will probably never be a chance to pass it ever again, because Republicans will take control next time and Republican leadership doesn't support it. So that's why it's like we have a few months. It's why I'm like talking about it as if with this urgency, because it's like with American Innovation and Choice Online Act and the Open App Markets Act, which is like a more targeted bill to stop Google Play and Apple App Store from doing monopolistic behavior, we have just a window of a few months before midterms and the government of the US changes. I mean, we'll still have, the FTC can still scrutinize these companies, but the FTC's budget is just too small at this point. And we have really like, those are Biden's best appointments. Lena Khan, who's the FTC chair, is a badass. So is Jonathan Kanter, who's the assistant attorney general for antitrust. These are great people, like very strong and committed anti-monopolists. Lena Khan is the person who, she's been kind of the leader of the whole antitrust movement. She's 32 years old. I mean, she's someone who, she was in Yale Law School in 2017. And as a law student, a senior law student, she released Amazon's Antitrust Paradox. And that's kind of formed the basis for all of that. And she was the one who really formulated the idea that like, even though Amazon's selling at low prices, Amazon is still hurting consumers and just, all this stuff through indirect ways. And this is her as a literal law student. And now she's at the head of the FTC. I mean, she's absolutely an incredible person. The issue is just that like, the FTC's funding is pretty low. So they're fighting Meta, like Facebook, and it's like they keep pushing it back just because Meta keeps demanding the judge. Most of these judges are like Trump or George Bush appointees, so they're all corporate hacks, and they keep pushing it back further and further. So yeah, this really is just like a fight of our lives kind of thing. And this is quietly, besides the Ukraine issue and climate, it sounds like hyperbole, but like, the antitrust big tech issue in America, besides climate and, foreign policy, it's the single most pressing issue at the moment, because you just have to, we cannot let these companies get any bigger. Obviously, corporate concentration is a huge issue everywhere in the economy, but these 4 big tech giants, they make the other large companies look like babies, like in terms of just kind of political economic power they have. They are national security risks, like Facebook allowing we talk about misinformation is bad enough in America, but like Facebook is like Spanish language, like Facebook barely even moderates Spanish language disinformation. I don't know if you followed that as an issue, but that's why like, and obviously Facebook could easily, it's the United States, they could easily have a massive team of Spanish speakers. 40 million people in America speak Spanish. It's not an obscure language or whatever, needless to say, but like they're not moderating Spanish language disinformation. So it's helping fuel fascism in Latin America at the moment. That's to say nothing of the rest of the world, how WhatsApp is used by the far right in India. It's used in the far right in fucking Myanmar, because they don't even have Burmese speak. You know about how like Facebook was helping the Rohingya genocide, all that shit. So it's like if you don't break up Facebook's monopoly power, that's helping facilitate like legitimately like far right fascist campaigns abroad, not even to mention what it's doing in America to civic discourse. With Amazon, Google, Apple, like if we don't stop their monopoly power now, and obviously these two bills I'm mentioning will only be a start, but it's like, this is so urgent that these bills get passed, because there really will not be another chance to do so realistically without like some kind of miracle. Other countries can still regulate them, but America really needs to be the leader since these are American companies.
What is in it for Biden? Why is he going after them? Because he is not exactly Bernie Sanders, but like, what can you tell about his intentions? And like, is he like, is it's just purely because to win the goodies among people, because people want this to be done, or what is happening there?
So it's really interesting because like Biden's is like the most progressive on antitrust of any president probably since like 100 years. And it's just because they've been able to push him on it. Like, because Obama was not good on antitrust at all. Like, there's actually a case where, here's one of the most ridiculous. I talked about how the FTC is like understaffed. The FTC determined Google was a monopoly in 2013. FTC staffers at the agency were like, yeah, we need to launch a suit against Google. But the FTC commissioners were like, no, let's just tell Google to stop doing bad stuff and not give them a fine. And then the FTC commissioner who did that is now a Google lawyer. It's literally just the revolving door in action. But Biden actually has great people at the FTC and stuff. And he is like seems committed to the antitrust bills and stuff. But you know, I think the main issue is like he really just needs to like pressure Congress to prioritize their passage. Otherwise, it's just not going to be. It's going to just be behind like, you know, further COVID bills and stuff like that. I think for him, like. Biden seems to, even though he's a moderate, he's more pro-labor than a lot of like recent Democrats were. So I think that's why he's more critical of Amazon, and that's why like Bezos has been criticizing Biden publicly and shit. But yeah, no, it is interesting, and it's also a case study of like an area where popular pressure did influence Biden's decision making. Elizabeth Warren has been really the spearheader of all the big tech antitrust stuff. But yeah, it's just like we really need these bills to actually.
There is a reasonable opposition as well, you know, like so union elections popping up in Amazon and you know, like obviously the topic of toxic work culture in Amazon and Facebook, Twitter, even Tesla as well. It's a different topic altogether. But you know, people, you know, I'll end this episode with one last silly question. What do you tell people who are like, then stop using Facebook and Amazon? Then my answer is, where do you go? But where? Like everything else is expensive. These people are deliberately keeping it free and cheap. And also, you know what, the big companies after a point they kind of become public utilities, in my opinion. It's like
literally,
like it's if my electricity supply is bad, you cannot say like then stop using electricity. Like no, that's the only electricity board in my area, so I'm gonna complain.
Also, right? Facebook is like, even if I did decide to stop using Facebook and stop using WhatsApp, I mean, I don't really use WhatsApp, but most Americans don't. Most people in the world do though. But even if stop using Facebook, WhatsApp, Instagram, Facebook is still going to be selling data to third-party brokers. So I can't sign something and say stop selling. They can't. Even if there was some formal mechanism, they would not obey it because they can handle any litigation they want. They could pay $1 billion in settlement fees. It's pennies to them pretty much.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's like when you have that at that scale, it is just a public issue, irrespective of one's own consumer habits. Because it really just touches upon every other aspect of your economic life, your you know, personal life. Just every aspect of it is touched upon in some way by like the 4 big tech giants.
Because like I'm going to share this podcast on Facebook, but I will still criticize Facebook. Like what the hell,
yeah.
So that's a really important topic, and I really hope this bill passes. That would be some start, because the rest of the world can fight all they want, but when US takes step, right, so that like the world notices is what I feel like. So when is this going to happen? What are the months and the dates that we are supposed to watch out for this particular?
So for American Innovation and Choice Online Act, ICO, it passed the Senate committee, so we'll have to go to a full vote. Hopefully that will be sometime in summer. That's what Schumer has kind of indicated, but it's not set in stone. So that's why there's a huge push to do it. But yeah, it's really just like hopefully in the next few months, because after that the window is just kind of closing. But yeah, no, I'm happy to share with both you and like the rest of the audience some really important resources, because I read about this stuff every day of just like really closely monitoring all this stuff.
And you also have a website to plug in. I guess you were sharing some articles where we can read all the work that you have done about what we just spoke. If you can plug in the websites.
For sure. Honestly, I use Twitter very little now. I honestly rarely post on anything. I'm actually trying to use TikTok now just because it's like popular, and I'm like, maybe I could do some good on that. Actually, not totally sure. Nothing really to plug.
The political the website that you just shared me. Just let me
Data for Progress. I'm an affiliated researcher there.
Right.
I mean, I would recommend people checking out what other stuff DFP does. I should be having an article with Daily Beast, I believe, coming out either today or tomorrow on antitrust. So hopefully that'll be.
What is the media's wind? Like, is anyone in media inviting you for interviews on this topic by any chance? No?
I go on Sky News Australia a lot, but not on this topic. I would love to. If anyone is like, I don't know if you know any. What are like the big channels in India? I know there's like CNN India, right?
There is CNN. There is I have no contacts, but I really hope you get as many platforms as you can to spread this message, and good luck with your work, and good luck to America with this push, basically. Thank because that will do the world a lot good, I believe, with this bill. Thank you, Aidan, for joining the podcast. Thank you, everyone. Till we join again, till we see you next time. I don't know when. Definitely not next week, but let's see. Cheers, everyone. Bye.
Bye.